What's going on, Raider Nation? Coming to you tonight with a quick, I plan on it being quick, but of course, when two podcasters get together and start talking Raiders football, it's probably not going to be very quick. So, with our probably somewhat drug out conversation, I'm going to be joined here shortly by ESPN First Take Your Takes, Jason Fitz, big time Raiders fan. Excited to talk to him. But first, of course, while you're watching this video, do not forget, make sure you subscribe. Hit that thumbs up button. Get me all the goods. Of course, you got to support Raider Nation, right? So without messing around, I want to talk to my guy Jason here. I want to know what the Raiders' expectations are for the 2020 season. So let's get into it. So joining me now, the former fiddle player for the band Perry, a guy that made the leap into the sports world, and he's kind of taken over the airwaves with ESPN, host of First Take Your Take, Jason Fitz. What is up, dude?
Man, just living the dream. How you doing?
Same thing. I mean, that's all we can do right now, right? Crazy times, dude. Crazy times, but still living the dream.
Yeah, and it is crazy. Like, you think about how much impact the world that we're in right now makes. I'll jump right into it, right to the Raiders. You think about when you're establishing a new city, a new market, a new fan base, you're establishing a new connection to a city. When you talk about the limitations presented by COVID-19, these are real challenges that I think, first, I'm impressed that the Raiders have navigated them as well as they have. Second, I'm impressed there continues to be so much momentum. But third, I think in 5 years, we're going to have to look back and say, hey, what effect did this have? Because it can affect the way a team relates to a new market.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we're even seeing it with it as just Raider fans that run a show. We're coming into Vegas like rolling hot. You have the draft coming in, all these, hotels, all these different places. They're so interested in the Raiders and the fan base, everybody coming in, but it's just been put on pause for months. PSL's coming through. I mean, we're season ticket holders. I know a lot of season ticket holders, of course, in Raider Nation. And it's just so many questions up in the air. And now we kind of had the first domino a little bit today, right? I had actually a friend, shout out to Stage Door Casino, purchased tickets to a Kansas City Chiefs game in Arrowhead. And they had their tickets refunded to them the next day, saying that their seats aren't available that week. And they're, going over limitations. And then we had, the Panthers?
The Ravens, I know, did a 14,000 seat limitation in their stadium. And look, that's just the beginning, right? I mean, that's for right now. And we have to really acknowledge, and this is why it's so heartbreaking when you think about what it means for a new arena. I mean, you've got the image here. And come on, Allegiant looks gorgeous. And you think about that fan experience for everybody. And, it's really surreal, and for me working at ESPN, one of the things that hit me when the schedule announce came out was the first home games on Monday Night Football. And, I immediately met with the bosses on the NFL side and said, hey, I want to do something. I want to do a feature. I want to talk about Vegas. It's the city I was born in. So the city I was born in gets the team that I've spent my whole life rooting for. Like, I want to tell this story. And now you're looking around saying, if I'm able to go because travel restrictions are real, even for people covering it, what's it going to be like standing on the sidelines for that moment? Like, it's a haunting thought of what it is. So these are all real, and teams across the board are going to have to make their own individual decisions, which I think is also stunning by the NFL. So there's no one blanket statement we can say right now other than I don't know, and that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people.
I know, man. We got some rough waters ahead. It's scary. Yeah. It's definitely scary. Not sure what lies in the future for us, but I'm glad you're bringing up now your kind of, I guess, close relationship and connection with the Raiders, man. Part of Raider Nation. This is good stuff. I've always I'm not a big podcast guy. I don't listen to a whole lot of radio. But I've always known Jason Fitz. My mom's a big country music fan. Knew you from then. Great stuff. But knowing like your show, hearing your voice, and knowing that you're a big time invested Raider fan is awesome, dude. And here's the thing: is the main reason I got so excited to talk to you over the last couple of days. It's like I want to sit here now. Obviously, our fan base is pretty much 100% Raider fans. There's those few Chief fans and Charger fans that like to stick around a little bit and find out
hate listens count too. Hate listens count too. We'll take them.
Hey, exactly, man. I'm not going to shoo them away at all. But, really, I just want to make a bunch of Jason Fitz fans today because I looked back. I like to research people that I'm talking to, and I look back due to your stuff. It's 2015, 2016. You're coming out. You're introducing your show. You got the Jason Fitz show coming out. I mean, you're decked out in Raiders gear. You got the Raider claw. I mean, you got Raider hat, Raider shirt. You got the Raider throw over your chair. You got still a table set up. Like, it's amazing how invested you are in the silver and black while still doing an NFL show. And I mean, hats off, because you're just a prime example of bleeding the silver and black no matter what you do. You might cover all sports, and if you cover the NFL, it's all teams, but you still just bleed the silver and black, dude. And I got to pay some respect.
Oh, thanks, man. You can't change how you're wired, right? Like, so when I was a little kid, I was in Vegas, and my dad was a Raiders fan. All my friends were Raiders fans. They were the LA Raiders when I was a kid. I'm 43. So they were the LA Raiders. I was in high school when they moved to Oakland. So city never mattered to me. And to me, it was never about that. I was a little music kid. And on Sundays, my dad always wanted to watch the game. So his one rule was, don't practice on Sundays. I don't want to listen to a violin while I'm watching the Raiders game. So my dad and I always sat down and we watched it. We'd have a dozen donuts and watch the game together. And throughout my entire life, like, the Raiders became my escape. Like, no matter how, by the time I was 8, I practiced 8 hours a day. I was this little classical music prodigy at the time. And like, I got into Juilliard and did all this stuff. And the funny thing is, for me, Sundays were sacred, not because I grew up in a religious house, but because I grew up in a Raiders house. And you shut down and you watch the Raiders play. And even when we were on the road touring with the band Perry, it was funny that the bus driver knew to find a spot where we could get satellite signal. And on Sundays, always had a dozen donuts, always sat down and watched the Raiders game. And so when I started with ESPN, I started a podcast because it was my passion. Like, I wanted to, music didn't feed my soul anymore. And so, I started a podcast just saying, if I can talk to cool people and have a good time, see where it goes. And, that was, like you said, 2015, 2016. Now here we sit a few years later, I'm on ESPN. But one thing that I looked at, like, I looked at Greeny. Greeny never hid the fact that he's a Jets fan. And I came out from the get-go. Like, Will Kane didn't hide the fact that he's a Cowboys fan. I'm damn well sure not going to hide the fact that I'm a Raiders fan. So, it's become just part of what everybody knows at ESPN. And, it's been I've been lucky to have Gruden hired as a coach and have them become more of a national story. At the same time, I make my ascent to ESPN. Better to be lucky than good. But, it doesn't change the fact that everybody knows how I'm wired and that I wear Raiders gear year round. And the running joke around all of campus is the phrase "my beloved Raiders," because that's what I always call them. So I've even got the Golick family will text me and they'll be like, "Saw the news about your beloved Raiders." Like, that's just what's become sort of known, and I'm proud of that. Like, you got to be who you are, and that's part of who I am.
I love it, dude. I mean, just keep doing what you're doing. Raider Nation is going to be watching for sure. And, you're bringing up all kinds of different things, right? You were born in Las Vegas. You are obviously a big fan of the Raiders. You watched the team move to Oakland. Ignoring everything that's going on this season and the limitations it's going to bring, what do you think about this move to Vegas in general? Like, obviously, the first questions that were being brought up leaving Oakland was, hey, that's a big market team. You can't leave that big market. They're not going to survive. Well, I feel like we're kind of starting to learn Vegas has a lot more to offer, whenever it comes to growing a brand as big as the Raiders already are. What do you think about the move to Vegas, and what does it do for the franchise as a whole?
So I'll take my personal experience with Vegas aside, because I like you said, I grew up there, but I moved when I was relatively young to the East Coast. So Vegas has always felt like a part of my home. But aside from that, even back when I was a podcast nobody was listening to, I did a whole episode based on Vegas as a replacement for London. My thought at the time was, why are we doing a London series to grow a game internationally when that doesn't have long-term sustainability in my mind? But you could do a series in Vegas. And the whole logic to it was fans will flock. Like, if you are a Chiefs fan, if you're a Vikings fan, you just sit down with your wife and you're like, honey, you want to go see a game? Yeah. Where do you want to go this year? Well, we can go check out the game in Kansas City or Boston, or we can go to the game that's in Vegas. Like, that's an easy sales pitch to me. So I always felt like Vegas was ready for the NFL. I heard from a writer that I trusted years ago that there was at least a conversation, and I laughed. I didn't ever think that I would see the day that the Raiders moved to Vegas, and I was stunned the day I saw it happen. I was convinced they were going to move. I just thought it'd be to LA. We all thought it was going to be to LA. That being said, there are a couple of things that I think people don't realize about Vegas. Vegas is a crazy sports town when, obviously, when they've had that opportunity. Like, I grew up around the Running Rebels in the late 80s and Stacey Augmon and Larry Johnson. The city was UNLV crazy at the time. Now, I realize it's a different city now than it was in the late 80s, but there is a backbone of fandom for the Raiders that existed when I was a kid. There's also a backbone of a sports city there. And then you have on top of it sort of a Vegas bond. Like Vegas is a city that really cares about each other. And to be serious for a second, I think you saw a lot of that after the mass shooting that impacted so many of my friends that are part of the country music community that were on that stage. And I've spent 20 years of my life living in Nashville. Nashville and Vegas are very similar in the fact that Vegas is a city that helps Vegas, like that believes in helping each other, that believes in sort of coming together. That backbone, that foundation is thirsty to support something that is specific to Vegas. That's why the Golden Knights work so well. That's why, at this point, I believe that the Raiders are going to be sustainable. And the last portion of this that I'll say to a long answer to a short question is, I have a tattoo on my arm that's the outline of the Raiders shield and the American flag in it. And it's from a few years ago. I had the opportunity to play the anthem before Charles Woodson appreciation game. So I went out, stood on the 50-yard line, played the national anthem, and I looked at these guys that I watch every Sunday and got all the bro hugs afterwards. And it was this incredible moment. But I sat in the stadium that day and I thought, man, I've been to almost every stadium in the NFL. And no matter how much Oakland is synonymous with the Raiders, we can all agree that stadium is a dump. We know that stadium is a dump.
It was our dump, but it was a dump.
Right. And there's a charm to that. But what always hit me is as my podcast started to grow and I got to talk to more athletes, the number of times I would say flippantly in an event to an athlete buddy, man, when are you going to go play for my beloved Raiders? The answer was always from those guys, never. The facilities aren't good. The stadium's not safe. I mean, these are things that players were saying that I think we don't realize matters. And it does. Mm-hmm. We're used to it mattering in college football. Your facilities, your stadium, your fan base all matter to the sales pitch of college football. I think what we don't realize is that even after you become a professional, when you come into certain environments, you want to play there. When you come in as a road team to certain environments, you want to be there. And that's what I think when I was sitting in the stadium looking around, I thought, man, I don't really care where my favorite team goes. I just want them to have a world-class facility that players will want to play at. And that's what I think they have now.
We nailed it, dude. We nailed it. Honestly, I got a good look at the stadium this last week whenever I was there. I mean, just hearing just the hype from everybody. Obviously, Vegas is ready to take us on. And hearing that, you're right, the Vegas strong movement, everything that was going on there, that was huge. I'm starting to really love this city that I've never been a part of really until now. Now you're talking about players.
And by the way, Oakland is a great place. Oakland fan base is spectacular. I think what we're seeing, and we're seeing it across the world of sports. I had a heavy conversation this week on First Take Your Take where we were talking to people about the Washington football team naming issue. And it's amazing how the people in Washington, all they cared about, we did a survey on my Twitter account, and I think 86% of the people we surveyed said the thing they care about most is the city name. So I dove into it on the episode and started talking to people saying, what is it you care about? And what we found, at least through the course of our experiment with people calling in, is if you live in the Washington area, you care about Washington more than the team name. If you live outside of the Washington area, you care about the team name more than you care about the city because it's what you resonate with. For the Raiders, which is undoubtedly and undebatably a global brand, there are millions of people that spend money on Raiders gear every year that care more about the shield than they do about the city name. And that's just a reality for a very successful brand. It says nothing negative about the city of Oakland. I just believe that the brand is sustainable if it had gone to San Antonio, Brazil, or Vegas.
Yeah, we were joking about the Mars Raiders. I'd still be a Mars Raider fan no matter where they're sitting at. Yeah. You're right. Super sustainable. I mean, I'll always consider myself growing up. My dad says he grew up a Los Angeles Raiders fan. That's how he considers it. I consider myself growing up an Oakland Raider fan. Love the Coliseum, love the trips, love the fans, love the energy in the stadium. But of course, like you said, it was a dump. We upgraded. It was a much needed upgrade. We went from having probably, arguably the best fans in the NFL to, the best brand, the best uniforms, to now having the best stadium in the NFL. Could be probably the best NFL city. So obviously it's, well deserving. We paid our dues, as we did probably paying our dues with some poor seasons here in the past. Of course, we've had a couple ups and downs these last few years. The Jack Del Rio, the Jon Gruden era, we're starting to see some spikes, some continuity, some different things going on there. You talk about players wanting to come and play in this new facility. Well, we added a lot of new additions, but for whatever reason, the biggest topic, and I want to get this out of the way right off the bat, I'm tired of talking about it all offseason. I've said my piece plenty of times, but I'm going to ask it because this is what everybody wants to hear. And that's Derek Carr. And Derek Carr is a guy that I feel like obviously majority of the fan base supports. But there's kind of, I guess, a loud minority here that is very frustrated with things. And I'm a guy that, if we're talking about history, used to sit in the stands of Oakland as a kid. I'm 8, 9, 10 years old. I was almost trained to, at halftime, be booing and yelling for the backup quarterback to get on the field. So it's almost like, I don't know, maybe if it's our DNA. I don't know what's going on here. But Jason, talk me through this. What are your thoughts on Derek Carr going into 2020?
So we're going to try and do something that's never happened in the history of this conversation. We're going to try and have a level-headed, honest conversation with no emotion behind it. This is impossible for football fans. No. I love the fact that everybody has decided you either have to be pro-Carr or anti-Carr. Here's the reality in my mind for Derek Carr. Is he a top 5 quarterback in the NFL? No. Is he a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? No. If you actually look at the list of names, top 10 is a phrase. It's easy to say, yeah, he's a top 10 guy, and then challenge somebody and say, okay, well, who are the top 10 guys? You look across the board. Is he a top 10 guy? No. Mm-hmm. Is he a top half of the league quarterback? Yes. All right. Is he better than he is worse? Yes. Is there a lot of good with Derek Carr? Yes. Can you win with Derek Carr? Absolutely. These are all things that I believe can be true. Is he an epic world beater? No. Is he Patrick Mahomes? Hell no. But does he need to be Patrick Mahomes? No. If the only sort of litmus test across the board is Patrick Mahomes or bust, then I would challenge everybody to remember what it felt like, to your point, of what it was like to watch not just Jamarcus Russell, but like there was a spot where you looked at, like, not you, but fans, myself included, looked at Marquez Tuiasosopo and said, God, this is the future. We got the guy. Trust me. Tua's going to do it. Like, really? Like, there's a level. You go back to even when I was a kid. I remember sitting around watching Todd Marinovich saying, no, this is going to work. Trust me. It's not as bad as you think. It's going to work. Like, you look across the board, this franchise has more bad quarterback play than good quarterback play in most of our lifetimes. And what we're seeing right now is the toughest spot to be in for any fan base. What do you do when you have a quarterback that's good enough but not great? And that's where I think Derek Carr is. I think he can be great at times, and I think at times he's sort of head-scratching. But through all of that, do I believe that Derek Carr can lead this team? Yeah. Would I trade Derek Carr for another quarterback that's in that same level? No, I wouldn't. So I'm a Carr fan, and I think that what we're going to see this year from Carr are huge numbers, because we've already seen huge numbers. I mean, when you just blindly look at his stats last year, they weren't just good. They were great. And everybody wants to turn around and look at the couple of plays that we've talked about, throwing the ball away, not being, not taking enough risk, not taking enough chances. He's not Rich Gannon in that sense. And you're right. He's not Rich Gannon. Rich Gannon was an NFL MVP. Is Derek Carr an NFL MVP? If everything goes right, we've seen that he can be. But he also, in that year that he was spectacular, was surrounded by not one, but 2 wide receivers that were at the time difference makers. Is he the type of quarterback that can win with nothing around him? No, he can put up numbers, but he can't win. Can he win with greatness around him? Yeah, I believe he can. So I think the trajectory is simple. I think we're going to see massive numbers from Carr, and we're going to see the type of year where finally everybody looks at it and says, oh, Carr's the guy. Not because Carr suddenly got better, but because he has better weapons around him. And what you'll see is that a top 15 quarterback on a great year can suddenly look like a top 8 quarterback, and that's when you feel like you got a world beater.
Yeah, obviously there was a drop-off after the magical 2016 year. Had maybe a little bit to do with everything going on around him, sure. But I'd imagine, injury had a little bit to play into there. Getting comfortable again in the pocket. I feel like he's growing into that. Now, to add on to your comment, I think to be comfortable with our starting quarterback, to be comfortable as a Raider fan with Derek Carr, I feel like we need to have confirmation that he's a top 10 quarterback. And you saying he wasn't last year, that's not a hill I'm going to die on. I'm a big Derek Carr fan, but I'm not going to sit here and try and tell you that he's been a top 10 quarterback in recent years. Now, with the tools around him, let's imagine that maybe this offense this year is going to be what it could have been last year with someone who shall not be named on this show, had he not disappeared. With Henry Ruggs coming in, with Lynn Bowden coming in, with all these pieces coming in, do you feel like now, going into 2020, that we can look at this next offseason and say Derek Carr was a top 10 quarterback?
So, forgive me here because I'm going to pull this up totally unprofessionally, but while we're standing here, or while we're sitting here, I'm going to try and pull up the tweet that was put out earlier today. ESPN.com put out a list of the top 10 quarterbacks, and I'm going to see if I can find it. I don't know if I can, but when you talk about Mahomes, he's not going to be Mahomes level off the top of our head, like Russell Wilson, Drew Brees. Are we putting him in that category? I mean, even if he has a great year, we're still not going to put him into that category because those guys have done it so sustainably. He's not going to surpass Aaron Rodgers, even though Aaron Rodgers didn't have statistically the best year last year. He's not going to surpass those names with one great year. Can he eventually? Yeah. I mean, what I would be completely comfortable with Derek Carr being the franchise quarterback for this team for the next 5 years. I mean, again, I don't think there's anybody. Trevor Lawrence, I know, is going to have people hyped. Maybe Trevor Lawrence can come out and be Patrick Mahomes-ish, maybe. But, I mean, if you're talking across the board looking at can he get to a level of play that equals Matt Ryan, who is considered to be a top 10 quarterback? Yeah, I think he can reach that. Can he reach Stafford? I mean, Stafford's this big controversial quarterback because he puts up numbers but never wins games. But everybody I talk to that analyzes film and former quarterbacks will tell you he's actually an incredibly good quarterback. Can Derek Carr get to that level? Yeah, I think he can be in that level. And if you've got a Matt Ryan, do you feel like you can win? I mean, I do. So that's where I think when you look at the offense, this isn't about Derek Carr. We're talking about the wrong person in all of this. Who we should be talking about is the $10 million man. You get paid $10 million a year, fully guaranteed to coach a team. You need to be able to coach up Derek Carr to get the best out of him. And if you can't do that, that's on you as much as it's on Derek Carr. At some point, Jon Gruden's responsibility as a $10 million a year coach is to make the most of a quarterback that is at least in talent, the top half of around the middle of the pack, let's say somewhere between 12 and 15 in the league. Shouldn't a $10 million a year coach make your number 12 overall quarterback play like he's the 8th best quarterback in the league?
You're 100% right. You're 100% right. There's blame to be put on Derek. There's blame to be put on everything that's moving parts around him going into Las Vegas. But I like, that there's a lot of pressure on the $100 million coach. He needs to go out there and he needs to be, if he's going to be the highest paid coach on the field, he needs to be probably the best coach on the field. And we have a lot of faith in Jon Gruden. I think he's going to be that guy that comes through, gets the proper weapons around him. I got to give him a little credit. Last year, I mean, he had a big wrench thrown in his plans. I mean, imagine all offseason. When were we acquiring AB? I mean, that was March. So, I mean, he's having basically 6 months to stew on this guy, having him in your playbook, coming up with all these plays that are pretty much designed around Antonio Brown. Even if the ball's not going to him, where he's on the field, I mean, he's playing a specific role in that play that's happening. Every time the ball's getting snapped, Antonio Brown's role is huge. So for that to get thrown, I mean, out the window right before the season started, he made proper adjustments, some injuries down the road, and everything going on. But I think, in my opinion, the biggest key now to this offense is Josh Jacobs. And first question I want to ask you, being a Raider fan, throw out the credential for a second. Being a Raider fan, was Josh Jacobs robbed of Offensive Rookie of the Year last year?
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. I mean, I said it on air at the time. He was robbed of Offensive Rookie of the Year. And I think sometimes what you got to do when you're looking at that is watch the film back on when a guy's in and when a guy's not in. I mean, how many times did we see the same type of running play? And when it was Josh Jacobs, it went for triple the yards. I mean, there's a spot here where, as much as you can have maulers up front, and I believe this offensive line has the ability to be spectacular, not just good, spectacular. But when you've got an offensive line that's that good, you still got a running back. You got to have a running back that can find the hole and make the most of it. And that's something that he does at just a different level. So, yeah, I absolutely. And Josh Jacobs is the key. He was robbed last year.
I love you, man. I love you as a Raider fan. That's good stuff.
And I will say to tie Jacobs into Gruden, by the way, I think two things with Gruden. The most impressive moment for him last year, I thought, came on Hard Knocks, which I still believe should have been called Soft Knocks because they didn't show us anything. But Hard Knocks, as much as people made fun of it, the knock on wood, if you're with me moment, I looked at Gruden and I said, man, I got to tip my hat because you're talking about a coach. I went on air the day before Khalil Mack was traded. I went on ESPN and I said, there is 0% chance that Khalil Mack is going to get traded for draft picks, especially. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard because Gruden likes veterans. He doesn't particularly care about the draft and he's not going to get rid of a great player. The next day my phone lit up. So most incorrect I've ever been on radio. But I watched Hard Knocks and I was like, man, he's changed. He understands it's a younger NFL. He's got a younger team. He's building around that. So the knock on wood, if you're with me moment was like, hey, this is not Gruden being a veteran guy, Gruden. This is Gruden being like fired up TV Gruden in a locker room. I think that works. The other part of it is after the draft this year, he said something that I don't think was covered enough when he said, we want the ability to be able to go 5 wide one week and then go 3 tight ends and a fullback the next week. If Jon Gruden can actually vary his offense to the point that you can't game plan because you don't know who's going to be active on Sunday, that's a level of coaching we've never seen in the NFL, to go that versatile and that varied in your playbook, which, by the way, would require a quarterback that's been in the system long enough to be able to execute it. That's why I think Carr will be successful. If you're actually able to run, hey, this week we're just going to pound the hell out of Jacobs and we're going to make everybody regret playing us. And next week we're going to use all these new wide receivers in every varied way. Congratulations. You better have a deep secondary. Like that's coaching right there that I would tip my hat to.
I like that. I think that's probably the key that's missing to our offense, because last year I felt like we mastered, if you want to throw 3 tight ends out there, if we want to run it down your throat, we're going to do that. We have Alec Ingold, we have a beast of an offensive line, and you have a Josh Jacobs that's going to go in there with, a good versatile set of tight ends. Darren Waller's developing. Foster Moreau's a guy that is not talked about. Had he not got injured towards the end of last season, he was a massive X factor in those heavy formations. Bunch him up and let this guy break free. The dude's running almost like a wide receiver out there. So that's going to be huge. And obviously Derek Carr adjusting to, run checks. That's something that you'll never note. It never pops up on a stat sheet. That's something that Josh Jacobs benefits from, that the offensive line benefits from. Between him and Rodney Hudson, having basically 2 quarterbacks right there picking up protection is going to be amazing. Now, you're able to flip the script into an offense that we haven't seen Derek in since almost pretty much 2016, when he could spread things out, or when he was back in college and he was a gunslinger in college. Spread offense. If you can incorporate those things with speed, with a healthy Hunter Renfrow, because like you said, whenever Josh Jacobs was off the field, the offense changed. I felt like also whenever Hunter Renfrow was off the field, that was another huge step back, because then you kind of lose your go-to guy. So we got some go-to guys now. I feel like, this is like the second or third time maybe Derek's coming in with 4 or 5 wide receivers returning from the year before, depending on cuts. I think could be huge. Now, what's going to help the offense, in my opinion, even more than that, is going to be more chances, right? This offense was top 5 pretty much in time of possession and drive success rate, but they were bottom 5 in number of drives. And just like that comes from the defense, right? Turnovers. We were bottom 5 in turnovers. We had a good defense coming on. We had a good run defense coming on. Hankins getting in there in the middle, Max Crosby being a do-it-all guy. But bringing in the linebackers that we have, bringing in the defensive line. The history of our defense. I don't got to tell you. Jack Tatum, Vilipiano, Townsend, Atkinson, Hendricks, Howie Long, Charles Woodson. The list goes on, right? We have all these great defensive players. We've had amazing eras of defenses in the silver and black. Are we able to, you think, return back, get that swagger back, bringing in guys, some trash talkers, Amik Robertson, Damon Arnett, guys that go out there and they jaw with wide receivers at practice. They're practicing in a park in Vegas and they're getting in the wide receiver's head, talking trash to him on their own team. That's the kind of stuff I feel like it's going good for us. Now, what are your thoughts on this defense going into 2020, and can they help the entire team make a jump and be nasty again?
Well, when's the last time we saw a great linebacking core for the Raiders? And it was a joke, for so many years, where it's like Jack feels like he can draft anybody and get him to play linebacker, and it never worked. I love Jack, but it just never worked, right? So you look across the board, when's the last time we saw great linebackers? That's for anybody that hasn't broken down much on Corey Littleton. He is a star. So to me, number one, first and foremost, the linebacking core got so much better, and they've got linebackers that can actually accomplish a lot in coverage. And I think that's going to be incredibly key here, because this defense can't be varied at some point if we know that every time the Chiefs spread them out, they've got to bring everybody off the field. So, the middle portion of that front seven, I think, is going to be the best we've seen in a generation. The linebacking core is going to be spectacular, not solid. I think they're going to be spectacular. Now, how's that help them get after the quarterback? There is an issue here. And at some point, is it the coverage or is it the pass rush? One's going to have to help the other. You got a lot of youth in the secondary. Youth is going to be, there's going to be great moments. There's going to be pull your hair out moments. The Raiders over the last several years has not particularly drafted well when it comes to corners. They just haven't been able to hit in that market. We're hoping that this is different. Part of the, I think, help that they can get there is getting after the quarterback better. And that's where Cleveland's got to step up. And when you talk about Cleveland Furrow, and for anyone that doesn't know my background with ESPN, I work a lot in college football. So anything that we do digitally on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, I cover all of that for college football. So the last 3 years, I've been heavy into that world. When Cleveland Furrow was drafted, I was handling the digital NFL draft for ESPN. It was me and Mina Kimes and Mike Golick Jr., Dominique Foxworth, Field Yates. And I remember the camera went on me, and I didn't say anything. And there's this moment where my negotiation live on, we had 10 million views for that broadcast. And in this moment, I know I'm live on camera, and I know I've got to say something because it's my favorite team and they all know it. All I kept thinking in my head was, they drafted an amazing human being. I don't know if he can get after the quarterback. So what do you do when you draft? Because I spent a little time around that Clemson defensive line before the draft, and those guys, they're just good people. So what you've got is a great guy that's incredibly easy to root for, that is going to work his ass off, and that's going to play the position in a full rounded way, because that's what he does. But is he going to get after the quarterback? I don't know. So to me, I think what we have to do at some point with Cleveland is we have to erase the mindset that he was a 4th overall pick and just say, so what, now what? Like, he's part of this defense. Who is he? I think when we stop expecting him to be the guy that generates a ton of sacks, we'll be much happier as a fan base with who he is as a player. Max came out of nowhere. And anybody that says they saw it coming with Mad Max is lost their minds. If anybody knew he was going to have that success, he would have been drafted far earlier by the Raiders. Like, if Jon Gruden knew he was going to be that good, he wouldn't have waited that long to draft him. So Max becomes this incredible, addition that nobody expected. I still think they're going to have to find a way to generate better rush from somewhere. That's why the Jadeveon Clowney conversation will keep coming up. That's why, all the way up until the season starts, I have one eye on Yannick Ngakoue saying, is there movement that's going to happen? He's not going to play for Jacksonville. He is a born pass rusher. So I'm going to be interested to see how they generate pass rush, because I don't feel comfortable leaving young corners on an island for a long time against explosive weapons. And that's what the rest of the AFC West has, are explosive weapons. They got to get after somebody.
I agree with you. We made a leap last year. We come in, we had Malik Collins in there. Mo Hurst made a little step forward. He's obviously playing well, and Jonathan Hankins has been doing well in run defense. So the defensive line took a step forward. But now going into 2020, we don't really have the tools again to make that big leap. We're kind of going in with the same layout. New defensive line coach, which I was a big Buckner fan, but so bringing in a guy that is going to have maybe a little bit more input now in the defensive coordinator's room. He's going to be in the defensive coordinator's ear. Maybe they can collaborate on things, I think, a little bit better and be in sync with the defensive line and what's going on in all of Gunther's system. So, man, interesting to see, but I'd love to see this defense be able to make that jump. If we can get back to top 20, a top 20 defense at least, get us close to middle of the pack and be on a decent side of the turnover ratio, I think we'll finally have that chance. Now, I want to end this on one last topic. We've kind of, I guess, rounded out to this point. And I want to know, because in 2016, you came out before the season, and you said that the Raiders were a 10-win team. You said the Raiders would win 10 games. Sure enough, we did. We won 12. We could have probably won 13 had we had, a full week 17. But do you share anywhere near close to that same optimism this year?
So last year, by the way, I said they were 7-9 was my prediction. So I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close on these things because I'm ever.
Well, get your globe out. Get your globe out. I want the Raiders 2020 record right now.
Look, the funniest thing I said last year, people rolled their eyes at, was I think they're a better football team. The last year I said I think this is a better football team that's going to be more competitive, but they're still only going to win 7 games. I'm going to say that I think it's a better football team that's more competitive and still doesn't get double-digit wins, not because of anything other than, it's going to be an empty stadium, so I think some of that home field advantage that would be there's gone, and it's a difficult schedule. I mean, there's just some spot where you look around and say, okay, they do have to play the Saints, and they do have to play in Carolina for a game that would be completely winnable, but now they're going to go into Carolina with no preseason, likely with no tape, no idea what Matt Rule's offense is going to look like, no idea how the Panthers are going to attack them. I mean, there's just sort of a blind era there that they'll have no idea. So that becomes more difficult. They got to play Brady, right? Like that Buccaneers team is stacked. So I look at the schedule and I think, okay, so chalk up 2 losses to the Chiefs. No offense, everybody. The Chiefs, I just think, are the best team in the NFL. They're going to run their way back to the Super Bowl pretty easily next year, I think. So, I chalk up 2 losses to the Chiefs. They should be better than – I chalk up 2 wins to the Chargers. They are better than the Chargers. The question is, can they get 2 wins out of Denver? And I think a split's more likely because that's usually what happens. So they walk out of their division 3-3. And now it comes out to what's the rest of it look like. So that's why I think 9-7 is pretty realistic. But I think they could put up 9-7 and look really stinking good doing it. They're a wild card caliber team. Like they should be in the wild card playoff hunt, especially with the seventh playoff position. They go into the wild card playoff hunt. Mayock has got to do a great job preparing for lack of depth because the COVID-19 issue is going to be real. There are going to be players that test positive for it the day before. Mayock's going to have a Rolodex of talented players. And what killed this team last year, to your point earlier, was a little bit of one wide receiver, but also a lot of injuries across the board to Hunter and to Williams. You know, you start to look at what injuries did. A GM, a great GM, and I think Mike Mayock can and is already on the way to that and can be spectacular. But a great GM, Mayock being great is going to be important because one game could be the difference between playoffs or not.
I love it, dude. Now, see, that 9-win team, I'm okay with that because last year, had we won that last game in this new playoff format, we'd be in the playoffs. I mean, we'd have been 7th seed right there. That's all it took. So we went through mountains of injuries and everything else going on. We overcame them, and we would have been right there on the heels. Jason, I appreciate you coming on here, man, and breaking down some Raiders football with me. It felt good. I felt like, you know, obviously you don't really hide your fandom anyways, but to come out here and be able to lay everything aside, you can talk just all solid Raiders football and not get judged by it. So appreciate you, man, coming on here.
No, I appreciate you having me. And look, I can praise Patrick Mahomes. Raiders fans tweet me all the time. Like, why do you say so many nice things about Patrick Mahomes? Let's accept some things. Patrick Mahomes can be great, and we can still hope we beat his ass. I also grew up watching John Elway twice a year, and sometimes we got the best of him. So even if we got to deal with it for 12 years, sometimes we'll get the best of him.
Good stuff. All right, so for all the viewers, if you enjoyed our conversation, obviously you probably did, you can subscribe to Jason Fitz's podcast down in the description. I got the link down there. First Take, Your Take. Make sure you jump into it, man. All the podcast listeners, get on top of it. Jason, I will, depending on unforeseen circumstances that have already ruined all of my plans this year, if things get better, maybe we'll see you in Vegas sometime, man.
Well, I'm going to find a way to get out there with the ESPN. So drinks are on me. We'll have a good time, and we'll talk football.
Let's go, man. Let's go. We'll talk soon, brother. See ya.
All right. Thanks, bud.
And there it is. Hey, shout out to my guy Jason again. That was a great convo. Didn't I tell you? It was probably going to be a little bit drug out, and that's okay. It was a great conversation. Every second of it, enjoyed every minute of it. Good stuff. Shout out to Jason Fitz. Like I said, got the podcast link to his podcast, First Take, Your Take, in the description of this YouTube video. Make sure you guys check it out. And while you're at it, again, if you didn't listen to me the first time, subscribe to this channel, turn on those bell notifications, and like it. Hit the like button. Hit that like button on this video. Give me some love, of course. Now, that's it. Raiders expectations. Hey, Jason, I love you, man. I don't care what you say. Raiders are getting 12-plus wins. Let's get it. See you guys next time.